All right, welcome back. So let's talk about Ragnarok, perhaps the most epically destructive myth, a story of a great end times. There's a lot to say about it. So yeah, let's start with a little bit of context. When we talk about Ragnarok, what are we talking about? We are talking about a story from Norse mythology that basically serves as the grand finale. And we've sort of dipped into Norse mythology here and there. I wish we had time to go even in further depth, but we'll talk about it now. Norse mythology is the mythology of basically Western and Northwestern Europe. So north and west of Greece and Rome, people who were barbarians back in the time of Greece and Rome, but kind of evolved into more of our modern European cultures. We know specifically Norse mythology as the mythology that came out of Scandinavia, out of places like Sweden, and associated with the Vikings, the Norse raiders. But in fact, it's very much connected to German mythology as well. In German mythology, the gods just have different names, but a lot of the same myths still apply. So it seems to be very much all connected here. And in the story of Ragnarok, it's a prophecy for the future. It's not a record of something that happened in the past. It's something that will happen. So it's always sort of described in terms of what will be. But it's written like a story in the same way as mythology. So Ragnarok, one older translation of it meant something like the twilight of the gods, getting the dimming of the divine strong powers, something like that. Because it is the end of almost all the gods in Norse mythology. They go out in a blaze of glory. Now, this is connected to sort of Germanic and Norse warrior culture, right? That the idea of dying in a blaze of glory has sort of a certain appeal to it. But here it's actually the gods, which is a pretty wild concept. And so it's only something that can happen in the future because the gods need prayer right now. Okay, but let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. Let's get into some notes here. So here's Ragnarok. So the version of Ragnarok that we have in the book that I had you guys read is specifically from a work that is called the Prose Edda. Prose Edda is the source of is one of the major sources of a lot of Norse mythology. It was written down by a guy named, this is a great name, Snorri Sturluson. So Snorri, son of Sturl, wrote all this down. And this was happening around the 1100s. This was a lot later, this was long after the original myths were most commonly practiced. By this point, Snorri's world, the Scandinavian world, was becoming more Christian. And so he was writing these myths down as a way to kind of connect with the distant past and to make sure that they would be preserved and not forgotten. Even though he, like many people, sort of implied that Christianity was better than pagan mythology or polytheistic mythology, he still had a lot of affection for these old myths. But in certain ways, some scholars think that this myth might be kind of new. Okay, so what's going on in the Prose Edda? Well, in this, at this point, we're following a guy named Gylfi. Gylfi is the king of Sweden in disguise. He's disguised and operating under a false name, Gangleri. Not super important, but just good to know. And so Gylfi / Gangleri, he's just kind of wandering along and he comes across this mysterious house and these voices speak to him and he can't see the people who are talking to him, but he recognizes that they are some sort of god, some sort of powers, and he asks them questions. So he is kind of doing an interview and they are willing to predict the future for him and tell him what is going to come about. So what do they say? They basically tell him about the end of the gods that is in some point in the future going to happen. So there's a lot of lead up to it. There are 3 harsh winters without summers. The sun and the moon are swallowed by the wolves. in Norse mythology, the sun and the moon are always running away from these wolves that want to eat them. Well, finally they get their chance. There are earthquakes. There's all sorts of strife, brother versus brother will fight. And general society is going to fall apart. And then there will be rough seas. The great world serpent, who has his coils around the world and holds it in place, is going to be shaking in the ocean and causing great tidal waves. So all that sounds like a bad situation. And this is the sort of signs by which you'll know that Ragnarok is almost going to happen. So if all this stuff is happening, you can bet that Ragnarok is coming up. But there's actually kind of a prologue to all this, and this involves the god Loki and the god Balder. So Loki is a very fun god. You've probably seen him in the Marvel movies. I think he's even more fun in the original myths and sort of less serious in a way, less about being a conqueror or something like that, and more just about doing whatever he wants to do. But he is a classic example of a trickster, which is an archetype we're going to talk about later on. But he kind of does what he wants. He's in it for himself. And he's done all sorts of weird things. At one point, he turned himself into a mare and gave birth to a horse, and that horse became Odin's stallion, six-legged stallion. So Loki is kind of beyond all sort of ideas of what people think are normal. He's half Jotun, which is often translated as giant, and the Jotun are the traditional enemies of the gods. So that sort of explains Loki. He's half enemy. But he has been known to get up to some bad stuff too. So Balder is a god that everybody loves him. He's associated with light and beauty, and he's just sort of noble and perfect. And his mother, Freya, wanted to protect him because she loved him very dearly. So she went around the world making everything, every substance, every material, every plant swear not to harm him. So, an axe made out of a wood from a tree could not harm him because the tree had promised not to harm him. So she gets all these promises from all around the world about, we will not harm Balder. But she missed one. She missed the mistletoe. She sort of thought, oh, there's this tiny plant, and it's like, it's not that big a deal. It shouldn't, how could mistletoe really harm anybody? So this is the sort of irony there. The gods start playing this game, which is called let's throw things at Balder. Let's try to kill Balder and watch how it all bounces off, which just shows this sort of sense of humor among the gods and among the mythological storytellers. And Loki comes in and he's like, hey, I've got a great idea. Why don't you try out these special darts? So he gives them to a god called Hob, and Hod. Is it Hod? Yes. He gives it to Hod, and he uses Hod as his agenda there. And he gives him these darts that he's made out of mistletoe. He's spied, and he found out that mistletoe had been missed. So Hod throws the darts, and bam, Balder's instantly dead. It's kind of similar to Achilles and the Achilles heel. He had one weakness, and of course, that weakness was found. And so Balder is dead, and the gods are very mad, and they imprison Loki. And he is actually tortured. His wife has to administer the torture. He is it's really weird. He's in the intestines of his own child, and he is administered poison by his wife that torments him and causes him pain. Which reminds me a bit of another tricksterish figure, Prometheus, who is sort of chained up for his bad deeds. So Loki is imprisoned, and in a way, what sets Ragnarok off is the whole Balder incident, because that's kind of like the light is going out of the world. But then what really kicks it off is Loki manages to escape, as he does in Marvel and in mythology. Okay, so now the world is falling apart, and the gods are going to battle. Um, Specifically, Loki has joined up with the frost giants and the Jotun, which are not quite the same, but the Jotun being the traditional enemies of the giants. Really, a lot of what's going to happen here is the gods, who are also known as the Aesir, versus the Jotun, their old traditional enemies. So this sort of classic relationship of antagonism. Sometimes they get along, but most of the time they're antagonistic. Now they're going to fight it out in one final struggle. Let's see. So you get a whole bunch of bad guys coming up. You got Fenrir, who is yet another wolf, whose jaws stretch from earth to sky. He's terrifying. The Midgard serpent, the serpent that holds the human world up. Although not the other worlds. There are actually a lot of worlds, including the worlds of the gods, and the worlds of fire, the worlds of ice, the worlds of the elves, the worlds of the dwarves. But the Midgard serpent is causing our planet Earth to have a hard time. Spring poison. Then one of Loki's allies is a fire giant named Surt. And Surt is, rides out blazing, and rides over the sweet rainbow bridge that the gods have, which is known as the Bifrost. So here the rainbow is explained as a bridge that lets the gods get from world to world. And here Surt is going to cross it. You might have seen this in Marvel as well, the Rainbow Bridge, although I don't know if it's as cool as like actually walking on the rainbow. And they actually break the bridge, and Loki and the Frost Giants come across. And also more allies. You've also got all the family of Hel. Hel is the goddess of hell, but really we should think of it more as like the Greek underworld. It's not until Christianity comes along that the idea of hell comes to mean hell in our sense. It's much more like a sort of place of sad ghosts, like in Greek mythology. Okay, so that's all the villains are lining up, and then the gods have to get ready. So you've got Heimdall. He is sort of the gate guardian of Asgard, the home of the gods. He is sort of watching the bridge, so he is the herald. He blows the horn to announce that war is upon them. And then Odin, Odin is an interesting king of the gods. He is more tricky than Zeus. Odin often appears in disguise. He travels around a lot. His whole thing is wisdom. He goes around seeking knowledge and wisdom, and some of it's like prophecy for the future. Traditionally, women, goddesses in Norse mythology, are the ones who have knowledge of the future. But Odin is the one god who kind of breaks that pattern. He's able to take that kind of wisdom on himself. He doesn't do anything like Zeus does of like swallowing people, but he does have a secret spring of Mimir. So Mimir is the spirit of or the owner god of this spring of wisdom. And so Mimir is very wise. Odin has also found some other ways to get wisdom. He hung himself on the world tree, the tree that holds up the 9 different worlds. He, let himself hang there for 3 days. It's almost like Jesus on the cross in a way. And when he was finished, he had great wisdom. He also gave up his eye to gain greater wisdom. One eye. And so he is a one-eyed god. He used ravens named Thought and Memory to go and gather, the service is seeing eye ravens basically, and to increase his own wisdom by sort of spying on people across the earth. In appearance, he's very wizardy. In fact, J.R.R. Tolkien based Gandalf off of a painting of Odin that he saw one time with a sort of big hat and a big walking stick. That's Odin, more or less. But he can take a variety of different forms. So he's a one-eyed, godly Gandalf, more or less. And so, of course, in this situation, he is going to get some more wisdom. And then he basically sets out to start the war after he's got his wisdom. Let's see, what order do we want to go here and here? Yeah, where do the Einherjar come in? Okay, about now. So the Einherjar, and this is a sort of weird name. They are the spirits of dead heroes. So you might have heard that the spirits of the dead in Norse mythology go to Valhalla. It's particularly the spirits of heroes, those who die in battle, like the gods are going to do right now. Although I don't think that they go to Valhalla, but mortals who die in battle in this glorious way, if they fought bravely, if they've been true warriors, they can go to Valhalla. And so the Valhalla is kind of a place within Asgard. It is a drinking hall where you basically have a big party. But these are all still warriors. These are the greatest warriors through all of history. And so Odin leads them out now. They are going to become part of his army. So they are basically the army of the great heroes. And they are going to fight the final battle. This is what they've been waiting for all this time. They've been training for this final moment. So it's kind of an explanation for who they are and what they do. So they go out to battle with Odin. Okay. At this point, now we have a series of fights. Odin goes and fights Fenrir. So Odin versus Fenrir, the big terrifying wolf. Odin dies, actually. Odin is killed. So this is the end of Odin. He goes out in a blaze of glory. And then, let me make sure I get all these details right here. Frigg, the goddess Frigga, or Frigg, fights Surt. It doesn't, I don't know if it says outright that she's killed, but it's sort of implied that she might be killed. Then Vidar, Odin's son, who's a bit more of an obscure one compared to, say, somebody like Thor, but he gets revenge. Fenrir. Thor goes up against this terrifying Midgard serpent. He manages to kill the serpent, but the poison gets him after the serpent is dead. Then you've got Loki versus Heimdall. Both die. And then Frigga clearly hasn't beaten Surt, at least, because Surt at this point sets fire to everything. And there's all sorts of chaos, and basically everything is on fire. Now, there's a weird aside here that there are actually good places to be and bad places to be. Valhalla is kind of done now, but there are, at least according to Gylfi and his conversation with these mysterious voices, there are sort of afterlives in a way. The sort of people who have led a good life will go to a place with golden halls with food and drink. It's not clear what they are or why Valhalla isn't around anymore, but maybe Valhalla is one of the things that burn up. And I guess Gylfi seems to be kind of talking about safe places. Is there anywhere on the earth that's safe? So you've got the golden halls. You've also got the bad places, murderers and liars. They go to a hall that is literally a building made out of poisonous serpents. So that's not good. There's been a lot of poison going on right here. Yeah, so it's interesting that there's still some sort of afterlife idea being worked into it there too. I guess they were wondering what happens to all the people on Earth while everything is burning. So you don't have to be a great warrior to go to the Golden Hall. You just have to live a good life. Okay, and yeah, there's all sorts of other stuff too. There's a ship made out of dead men's fingernails, which is why you should cut your fingernails. Because if you die with your fingernails too long, then they will have more building material to build this ship, and Ragnarok will come sooner. So that's kind of fun. And finally, how does it all shake out? Basically, Gylfi asks, will any of the gods be living? Will there be anything left? And the sort of voice says, there will actually be something that works out. There will be a green, fair land coming back. And there will be places that escaped the destruction. Now, most of the gods are gone. The only gods that we have left are Vidar and Vali. They are the sons of Odin. Vidar got MVP points for killing Fenrir. We have Modi and Magni. These are the sons of Thor. So we got Thor in there as well, but Thor's dead. And then this is kind of funny. Balder comes back. So he was dead. This kicked it all off, but he comes back from the afterlife, from the region of hell, where sort of the sad ghosts go. And he also has Hod with him, because apparently the gods kind of lynched Hod when he led to the death of Balder. So they blamed him initially. So that's why Hod was in the afterlife. So it's like they missed the party. They missed the whole war. And now at the end here, they're finally coming back. Let's see. And there was something else I was going to mention. Oh, yes. I think I actually meant one. I missed one of the fights here. So that is Garm, which is a terrifying dog. So in addition to terrifying wolves, you also have terrifying dogs. It goes up against the warrior god Tyr, and as you might expect, both die. Yeah, just bear that in mind. We'll throw that into our list of battles there. But it all ends in just 6 gods left. And what about the people? Well, that's interesting. It's not quite super clear to me how that works out with the afterlives of the gods, but it seems like the rest of the gods, except these 6, have gone away. And the humans, they have gone to a place called Hodemir's Wood, but it's just 2 humans. They are hiding out in Hodemir's Wood. And this is one of the few places that escaped the destruction. This is an old piece of, this is a very old forest from the dawn of time. And so this is a very sort of magical and enchanted place. And so no wonder it escaped the destruction. And so these 2 humans, they survive. They eat morning dew until the fire is gone. And these are Lif and Lifthrasir, whose names mean life and passion for life. So life finds a way, life goes on, life survives, and passion for life survives. And these are a man and a woman. And what we also have good news is that the sun comes back. So that's nice. The sun has a daughter who is equal to the previous sun. So the sun returns to the sky, even though it got eaten by a wolf. There was the daughter. And Gylfi says, you may think this strange, and it is strange. But so we've got 6 gods, 2 humans, and the sun. And so that is how things survive, because Lif and Lifthrasir, they repopulate the human race. And it said, in fact, that a very noble and beautiful people will come forth from Leif and Leif Thrasir. It's also very interesting to compare them because the Norse mythology has two humans at the dawn of time as well, and they are Ask and Embla, whose names mean ash tree and elm tree. So the ash tree and elm tree were the original parents of humanity in Norse mythology. And now here at the end of it, we have Leif and Leif Thrasir starting everything over again. And you know, we do have these six gods in theory still around, but it almost seems like they're very much diminished in importance. And for the most part, the old world of the gods and who the gods were, that has gone away. And it's a time where the gods themselves are kind of fading out of existence or fading away from being important in the world. Now, why is that? Why is this story sort of taking this approach? You know, life will continue, but the gods will not. That's very interesting for any mythology to go after that. And one thought that some people have had about this is that it might be Christian influence on Snorri. Because Snorri lived in a time period where his gods were going away. And so they were fading away into gods who were, into the Christian God being more benevolent and less sort of warlike. And so maybe what he's saying here is, you know, he's representing, you know, he says this is all going to happen in the future, but maybe it's already happened by the time that he's writing it. He's actually still writing about the past, that the Ragnarok already happened, and the sort of violent warrior gods of Norse mythology gave way to this god who is much more, you know, much more sort of peace-loving and less all about the chaos. And so, you know, maybe he's basically finding a way to reconcile his sort of modern Christian world with these old Norse gods, which after all, he's looking to the past. He's seeing them as something he wants to preserve from the past. That's the theory anyway. And, you know, we come to the end, and indeed the voices that Gylfi is talking to disappear as well. The hall that he was in talking to these voices just completely vanishes, and he's in the wilderness. And he comes home and he tells everybody what he had learned. That's interesting. It's again that theme of, you know, the gods going away. So there's a lot to think about with that. But in general, what kind of common features do we identify from destruction myths? Well, one of the big ones is this idea of a new start, a new future. Destruction often seems to be about sort of clearing something away, destroying one part of the world. It's very rarely the entire world that gets destroyed. I guess the closest thing that we could come to is the Christian idea of the apocalypse, or as described in the book of Revelation. But even there, there's still the idea of renewal, in that God creates a new heaven and a new earth for people to inhabit. This is the final stage, is paradise as set up by God. And I almost see some echoes to this here in you know, the new gods, or the descendants of the gods, and the new sort of noble human race that's going to come forth. But I think, you know, destruction just kind of leads to creation. We saw that in a cycle with the different ages of man. A lot of these stories remind me a lot of the ages of man, that we had something and then it went away. Or in Hindu mythology, where the world is constantly going through this cycle of being created and destroyed, at least in one strain of Hindu mythology. Yeah, there's a lot to think about here. And I think creation myths and destruction myths are two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. They are pretty closely related to each other, but also they kind of have some opposite directions as well. And I'll be curious to hear what you guys think the different concerns of creation versus destruction are. That's going to be our discussion question for today, is how similar are creation myths to destruction myths? Do you think they have anything in common? Or do you think they are more different? What do you think the differences are? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and upload this set of notes as well. On Thursday, we will have a review day, so we can talk more about some of this stuff if you like then. And we'll also go through and we will look at different stuff on the study guide and just review everything we've talked about so far in preparation for the upcoming midterm on Tuesday. All right, take care, and I will see you guys on Thursday.